We are a consortium of Earth observation specialists working for the European Space Agency.
The framework in which we operate is twofold. The first guiding principle is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 11. Make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient and sustainable. The second framework is the Project Implementation Strategy in international financing institutions like the World Bank and other development banks.
Our aim is to extend and improve the use of satellite data for the monitoring of indicators in order to reach Sustainable Development Goal number 11. We also want to facilitate international development work in a globally consistent manner by using Earth observation data and methods.
We have covered 32 cities around the globe with a total of more than 510 products and 11,000 square kilometers mapped. Our basic products comprise status and evolution of urban extent, as well as land use and land cover and its change over time. More specifically, targeted maps include slum maps, maps of open and green spaces, building footprints and heights, infrastructure, as well as hazard and risk maps. Based on these maps, we generate spatial analytics and the before-mentioned indicators for SDG 11.
These tools are very much relevant because they provide evidence.
In general, the preparations of bank operations take several years, but in these cases, it only took around 6 to 8 months for the preparation, thanks to the whole analytics, maps, and data evidences. The best part is that it was helpful to communicate with various stakeholders on the ground.
Okay, so now I want to introduce the speakers of today. We have 3 speakers today. 2 are from within our consortium in the EU4SD Urban Project. They are both from GISAT in the Czech Republic, Tomas Soukup and Jan Kolomaznik. And we are very happy today to have a user side presentation from Hyunji Lee from the World Bank Group. She's responsible for the Urbanscapes program. And yeah, this is really a pleasure, and thank you, Hyunji, that you will also be part of this webinar today. The content in very short, we will have a short introduction by Tomas about the EU4SD urban products and the general context. And then we'll have a presentation from Jan about mapping urban and green spaces by remote sensing and the related analytics. And then Hyunji will give us the user perspective, remote sensing for upgrading urban spaces on the ground. And then we'll have, as I said before, the question and answer section. Okay, so without further delay, I will give now the floor to Tomas. I'll make you presenter and you can give us the first part of the presentation.
Thank you, Manuela. So good morning, good afternoon, whenever you are attending today's webinar. As mentioned in the introduction, we will talk today about space application support in the context of improving urban livelihoods, or in more specifically, we will deal with the support in the context of green areas and open space monitoring. So before we will jump into more technical details, I will just briefly introduce you the whole activity, so you have a clear understanding about the context of the work done. I already apologize to those who attend our series regularly, because this will be a bit repetition for you. So I have already mentioned space, so I start with a space slide, so I just want to highlight the driver or enabler of our activity. You may know that there is a strong European space program called Copernicus, which was developed in last decades. And this is supported by ESA in EU with really growing constellation of Sentinel's Earth observation satellites. And part of that, of course, is also the dedicated support of global challenges, including sustainable development. So in this context, there is a lot of collaborations with number of international financial institutions, also called multilateral development banks, how to use this space capacity available in the most effective way to achieve expected impact. So EO4SD is one of these attempts. This is not the first one. You see that it's already from the 2008, but the Earth Observation for Sustainable Development project has a bit bigger ambitions and is also a bit bigger in size. So what we are trying to really support again or continuously support the understanding of potential of EO in such applications. But what we also try to look on some kind of mainstreaming of this support to really to the official development assistance working practices. And we also try to look what would be some sustainable financing model for such a systematic support. So these are the aims of the, let's say, framework project in which today activity or the activity which will be discussed today was done. You see the consortium below, and GSAT is one of the partners of this group. Here we start with the standard products and services. Those of you who have participated in previous webinars knows the slide already. I would just, I will not go to the details. I will just pick up the word standard, just to be more clear what we consider as a standard service and also highlight differences between kind of one-time ad hoc production on project, let's say, level and a standard products. So our products are really tailored for sustainable development support. They are based on the specific user requirements. And what is important, they are harmonized in product specification, then follow the standardized methodology. They are stringent on quality control procedures, and they are comprehensive and transparent in documentation. All of this is very much important if we really talk about some systematic use of EO data. You can find more in the product brochure, which is on our website. And from this domain, we will today concentrate on the product which we called initially green areas, but in context of today's speech is more green areas and open spaces monitoring. So just to give you context, here we work on the adaptation of our initial green areas monitoring products to fit more to current policy demands, which was also confirmed by inclusion of this theme in the spatial development goals. I will not go through all the slide, but just to mention that that open space areas and green areas and public assets are nowadays really recognized as a driver for the sustainable development of the cities. And our aim is really to provide the product which can support these activities. We did it in last, I think, 2 years with kind support of World Bank Urbanscapes Group, which Hyunji will introduce later on. And we were exploring at the one site really the potential for identification, monitoring, quantifying, and characterization of these areas. But also we were working together on shaping this product to the level which is really useful for the day-to-day operation and understanding the urban assets in these areas. Jan will go to more details on the technical side, and Hyunji will also provide the vision from the World Bank side, and also I think it will be she will provide a kind of interesting reality check. What is the real utility of our products in the context of their work? So I will give a floor now to Jan, and he will provide you more technical details and how we approach the whole work. Thanks for your interest, and thanks.
Thank you, Tomas, and I will just give the floor further to Jan for your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Tomas and Manuela. My name is Jan Kolomaznik, I'm from GISAT, and I will be talking about mapping urban open and green spaces using remote sensing. So the aim of my presentation is to give you basic insight into principles of open and green spaces mapping from satellite data. And in the first part, I will focus a bit more on theoretical background, EO4SD products at a glance, and the methodology. While in the second part, I will provide more examples of analytical outputs that were derived from the results of EO analysis for Dhaka city and that were provided to the team of Urban Scapes. I will start with a definition or defining the term public open space. When dealing with public spaces, urban planner will most likely come out from definition provided by UN Habitat, which is defining it at a sum of public parks, streets, boulevards, recreational green areas, public playgrounds, and other areas of public facilities. This definition do not include areas devoted to public facilities that are not open to the general public or open spaces that are in private ownership or vacant lands in private ownership. Urban Atlas definition, the second one, is widely used in remote sensing community. It is because it puts an emphasis on definition from land use point of view in a way as it can be interpreted from satellite or aerial imagery, and mostly related to it is mostly related to presence of urban green land cover type. Artificial non-agriculture vegetated areas might be, according to this definition, divided into two classes, or are divided. First, green areas itself, consisting of vegetation that is planted or regularly worked by humans and strongly and visibly human influenced. And the second is a sport and leisure facilities as a functional units that are independent on the fact if they are being sealed, non-sealed, or built up, and that include the associated lands. The Urban Atlas definition does not include private gardens within housing areas, buildings within parks such as museums or governmental areas, patches of natural or agricultural vegetation that is enclosed by built-ups or without being managed as green urban areas. Naturally, there are some incoherencies between the above nomenclatures and definitions, notably in definition of living street, inclusion of living streets, open spaces, and squares. And furthermore, Urban Atlas is giving or is working with a less strict public term by definition. It will be shown up later how we try to deal with the issue in cooperation with World Bank Urbanscapes team. Improving, as mentioned by Tomas, improving urban livelihoods has been recognized as one of priorities by international development community, and there have been various interventions and upgrading policies implemented at a range of scales within development world and developing cities. At the global and country level scale, comparative city level diagnostics can be monitored. Examples are SDGs target 11.7 or global city indicators of World Bank, all focusing on public areas shares, their accessibility or allocation to inhabitants, city inhabitants. At a high level of granularity, measures improving livability are locally targeted. And these interventions are, however, often lacking from access to accurate and complete information about open green spaces, their locations and typologies, and thus hindering prioritization and scaling of interventions. In both cases, remote sensing may provide and is providing support to evidence-based decision-making and city-level diagnostics. Information derived from remote sensing and from other open sources is bridging the gap. It's actually bridging the gap represented by lack of the local data, and it provides continuous coverage at the city level. Earth Observation for Sustainable Development Consortium in Urban provides product portfolio that is consisting of 2 services or product types to tackle information needs about open and green areas. Standard product shows location, spatial extent and size of green areas in form of polygons. The typology is based on Urban Atlas nomenclature, so there are 2 classes. Optionally, evolution of green areas can be also provided. This change product can be supplemented with additional information based on overlay with land use land cover product. It is localization of areas being subject to extension or withdrawal of urban greens, statistics about structure of land use classes being consumed by green extension or consuming the former urban green areas. Optional product is extending the standard one by supplementing additional classes and objects related to public use. Generally, it is not feasible to interpret very precisely whether a certain area is public or not just from satellite imagery. However, this information may be extracted for objects present in open data sources such as OpenStreetMap. Resulting specialized product or optional product therefore combines spatial context and characteristics derived by image intelligence with information obtained by open data mining. Target typology or nomenclature has been defined based on requirements and in collaboration with World Bank's Urbanscapes team. Well, I'm not going to go too much into detail, but in a nutshell, open and green areas workflow for derivation of optional product combines land use polygons from standard product with open spaces and green patches segments that are derived by object-based pattern recognition automatically. These spatial units are spatially aggregated, and for each polygon, set of characteristics or indicators is derived by object-based image analysis and GIS analysis. Additional objects or interim indicators are further extracted directly from OpenStreetMap. Rule-based decision tree facilitates classification of indicator features into target typology, which might be customized. And in the last step, analytical outputs are prepared based on subsequent spatial overlays and GIS analysis. Now going a little bit more into detail, as already mentioned, several characteristics are derived from imagery or by GIS analysis. In the follow-up steps, one or more indicators are used to define contextual criteria that are relevant for decision tree classification. In turn, they are distance to roads that are determining the level of accessibility to open green areas, distance to water to define waterfronts, shape or compactness of polygon to identify if it is linear or not, and class-specific patterns indicating, for instance, level of park class membership to distinguish managed parks with horticulture patterns from forests, woodlands, or other unrecognized high or low green vegetation, location to distinguish between urban and suburban areas, and size to differentiate pocket from neighborhood level or city level open green public spaces. This schema seems to be a little bit complicated, but it is not so much. because the criteria are applied within this decision tree using a set of consecutive rules, and classifier concludes into up to 15 classes. Resulting classification contains also residual classes such as other green and other open areas. Their prevalence depends on geographic context of the city, its morphology, and level of inclusion of open and green land cover polygons from automatic object-based image analysis. As these classes mostly lack the public space function, they are usually excluded from subsequent analytical assessment, but they still might represent valuable information about city patterns, morphologies, and their evolution in time. Thresholds utilized within the decision tree are supposed to be checked and modified for classification in different cities and in different geographical contexts. Furthermore, classified polygons may be complemented with additional pointwise or linear features derived directly from OpenStreetMap as a subset of streets or subset of public buildings. Accuracy assessment is typically provided for standard product, as mentioned by Tomas. Stratified random sampling with reinterpretation of satellite imagery as a pseudo-ground truth is typically employed. And accuracy assessment for specialized optional product is now in the process. It is going to be based on a random sampling, and if applicable, it would be accompanied by ground truthing by local task teams. We expect that high accuracies are expected for parts and other classes with relatively straightforward interpretation, while it will be lower for those classes with mixed definition and which are, of course, more difficult to interpret from imagery or from open data sources. Now I'm going to quickly present examples of analytical products that were derived from open and green areas product or from ancillary data for Dhaka city. These results have been delivered to Urbanscapes team of World Bank. Some results have been derived, the same results have been also derived for Karachi, and they are also being mapped for additional cities in Iraq, Africa, and in Latin America, according to the requirements of Urbanscapes team. So the transport network was derived from OpenStreetMap, and it was further augmented using satellite imagery. And together with land use information, it helps us to understand what is the morphology and structure of the city. Indicators such as road network density per square kilometer or intersections density per square kilometer were aggregated at either VART level or for regular grid, as demonstrated in the images. And furthermore, this information, these statistics enter as an input parameters into locational criteria of open and green spaces categorization, as presented before. Satellite image analysis shows that between 2006 and 2017, the urban extent in Dhaka increased by more than 23%, which corresponds to approximately 2% average annual urban extent growth. At the same time, population in Dhaka has, however, been increasing with an average rate ranging between 4 to 5% annually during the last decade. And this disparity can be explained by internal development within the urban blocks, by densification of the building stock, by infilling, and by growing of buildings into height. This conclusion is supported by our findings from land use data analysis, which is showing that in the image, which is shown in the image on the right, most of the land use changes were related to internal urban development, related to this densification and growing of building heights. This development typically goes at expense of opened and vacant lands within the city and inside urban fabric blocks. As demonstrated in the right by red color, almost 50% of urban blocks face decrease of content of their greenness, which is represented by index as a sum of all green patches within each urban blocks during the observed period. Furthermore, development of new urban green, sport and leisure spaces has not kept the pace of rapid extent and population growth. Estimated average annual growth rate is far lower compared to urban extent growth. Moreover, some originally green spaces were consumed by urban development, as demonstrated in the figures on the left. Previous figures and graphics were derived from baseline land use and cover green areas product to give overall picture and proxy indicators. To support evidence-based operations, we derived extended typology of potential public spaces for 2017 in Dhaka so that its distribution and diversity could be assessed. Looking at proportions of categories or their frequencies, we see that the typology is not very diverse in Dhaka. There are in total only 11 out of 15 classes identified, and most of the areas are attributed to sport and leisure areas, medium-sized park, and also to waterfronts, which could be further be broken down by additional criteria. Sustainability of the potential public spaces network was assessed using 4 main indicators requested by Urbanscape's team that will be further explained in the following slides. All of them were provided to the team, aggregated at the administrative units level for wards. But it's worth to note that results derived from Earth observation can be aggregated at literally any custom spatial unit within the city, tailored according to the user requirements and needs. So according to the results from open and green areas, the shares of these areas in Dhaka, they are concentrated in the city center and along the south-north axis as visible in the image on the left. Accessibility was calculated as a distance between each public space polygon and nearest segment of connected road network. Furthermore, the accessibility in its more general meaning was further quantified by calculation of street path distance to the nearest open and green space for each street segment. This is displayed in the map on the left. Areas with lower accessibility rates are clearly identifiable. They are those that are represented by darker red colors. Furthermore, connectivity was calculated as an Euclidean distance between nearest open and green spaces in the network. Please note that the most of least connected spaces, the red ones, are located in the developing area of the East Dhaka, which generally lacks open and green infrastructure. And finally, inclusivity, the 4th indicator, was estimated using aggregated population grid. We used the gridded population of the world dataset. Though, thanks to the coarse resolution of the dataset, there are inevitable inaccuracies inflicted by this resolution. It is evident that a considerable share of Dhaka population lives within 400-meter distance from identified open and green spaces, which refers to approximately 15-minute walking distance. And last but not least, additional statistics and visualizations were provided to the Urbanscapes team. Statistics indicating structure of open and green areas typologies within subsequent distance band or within selected directions, or relationship between size and level of urbanity represented by compound urbanity index, which assumes both built-up and road intersection density within surroundings of each open and green area polygon. In my last slide, I'm going to show the print screen from online tool introduced by EO4SD Urban that was developed by GSAT. It is going to be available at Urban thematic exploitation platform, and it will provide functionality to explore results of open green areas mapping through web browser. In particular, it's useful for displaying the distribution of the identified polygons, to see aggregated statistics for custom analytical units such as administrative districts visualized in horoflat maps and various graphs, and to benefit from interactivity, and dynamic linking between the data in the map and in the graphs on the right hand, and from advanced selection and filtering functionalities. The utility of this tool will be demonstrated and assessed during the next phase of the project. So this is all from my side at the moment. I would like to thank you very much for your attention, and I will be happy to answer any questions that you may have at the end of the webinar. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Jan. And I already ask you again to post your questions in the question box if you have any. And now I want to give the floor to Hyunji Lee for her presentation from the user perspective.
Thank
No
you,
problem.
Manuela, and also Jan and Tomas. So, yes, this is Hyunji Lee working at the World Bank, and I'm a team of the Urbanscape and also working in the South Asia unit, focusing on neighborhood upgrading projects. So, I'd like to talk more about user perspective asset, like how tech teams at the bank has been using remote sensing technologies for upgrading urban spaces on the ground. As Jan and Tomas mentioned, my team has been working closely with the GSAT team on EO4SC urban product, focusing on centered on public spaces. This has been extremely helpful for us because while there's been increasing demands for quality of life, livability, or better physical urban spaces, but it is really hard to understand where's what occurs city because there's no data and also no systematic understanding of public spaces in cities. For example, as Jan mentioned, there's an incoherent definition of public spaces, and also when you are looking into some data or information on public spaces, many of them are using green spaces as a proxy of the public spaces because of the data availability. But as again, the Jan mentioned, public spaces are not just green areas; it's beyond than that. And also, public spaces are really multidimensional characteristics and also diverse classes of public spaces. So let me start with this famous metaphor of touching an elephant with closing your eyes. So as you can see, there are everybody is thinking about different things while they're touching exactly the same elephant. So this is exactly how I feel when I face with data availability or whenever we start a new project on the ground. Tech teams are trying our best to get the data analytics and also go site visits to gather some data, but they're simply not enough to get a full entire picture of the city. So I'm always thinking elephant can be a city for practitioners, like let's say a comprehensive inventory of public assets of the city. And the challenges that get you blinded are lack of data, time and money and local knowledges, and also we are working in silos. So at this point, EO4SC comes into play. So the product offers systematic, but at the same time, contextualized understanding of urban assets and public spaces. So this is a snapshot of Karachi in Pakistan. And let's imagine that you are walking around, wandering in those blocks, and you enter that you can see the Zamzama Park. And someone might think that, oh, Karachi has a lot of greeners here. But when you're looking into other blocks, there's a barely available public spaces, green areas in there. So it is really hard to figure out how the city looks like by foot or even driving. So with remote sensing technology applied, we were able to identify these different types of public spaces. Like as Jan explained very well about how the whole rule-based identification was applied to this whole analysis. So these different colors means different types of public spaces. Blue color means potential waterfront, and green colors are like green areas, orange colors are a bit more about open area squares. So this was a really groundbreaking activity for us because it has been helping us a lot in many ways. First of all, we were able to conduct comparative analysis even for data scarce cities. Jan already presented the whole list of DACA analysis, but when you put the different cities in a comparable manner, it gives us a bit more different perspectives, a bit more different implications. So, for example, when you're looking at the left side, there are different compositions of different classes of public spaces in Dhaka and Karachi. In Dhaka, you can see there's a lot of sport and leisure areas and also lots of neighborhood level parks, like a bit bigger park. While in Karachi, there's a lot of unclassifiable vacant lots or small parks. And so Karachi lacks the green areas here. So someone might think that then Dhaka would be doing better than Karachi in terms of a public space network. But when you're looking at the right side, there's a talking about accessibility. On the top, there's a Dhaka, and you can see there's a lot of inaccessible public spaces, while in Karachi, around 70% of public spaces are really accessible from the nearest road. So in terms of accessibility, Karachi is a way better than the Dhaka. So this gives us the implication that we cannot just talk about the quality of public spaces based on the quantity, but more like as we analyze so far with in cooperation with the GSA team, different indicators and different perspectives are extremely important. And also, it is practically significantly contributed to the bank operations as well. First, it reduced the cost and time for understanding data and data scarcities by site visit and manual work, and also improved project design with evidence-based approaches. And lastly, it was extremely helpful to communicate with the local partners in a better way with having some evidences. So when you're zooming into each benefit, we are now talking about the neighborhood level upgrading project, focusing on public spaces. And those projects that directly benefited from EO4SD urban products include Karachi Neighborhood Improvement Project and Dhaka City Neighborhood Upgrading Project. There are more, but then I'm going to present about these two projects only. So these kind of project objectives are mainly to enhance public space and improve urban services in those selected neighborhoods in cities. So in general, the preparations of bank operations take several years. But in these cases, it only took around 6 to 8 months for the preparation, thanks to the whole analytics, math, and data evidences. So this is an example of our publication on Karachi, and the large part of it was benefited from the EO4SD product. So we use a lot of remote sensing results and speech analytics, and so which contributed to improving efficiency of the preparations of the project. And also, we were able to improve the project design with evidence-based approaches, which means is that we are talking about neighborhood level projects. So test teams had to select some targeted neighborhoods for the project. And so based on the result of the analysis, we created a neighborhood selection criteria to address the spatial and political inclusion. So we measured demonstration and deprivation factors. And so this map shows the livability, the conditions of the neighborhood across the Dhaka. So red color means more deprived areas, and green color means less deprived areas. So based on this result, we are zooming into the specific neighborhood and advise the local partners, government, to select some specific neighborhoods. And so we came up with these 4 specific targeted neighborhoods, and we identified some specific different types of public spaces as well. When you're zooming in again into the one specific public space site, we have even schematic concept design for each site, and we reflected the local needs identified from the analytics to this kind of design. For example, if a neighborhood is lacking greeneries or lacking sports facilities, then we can put more greeneries or facilities into our project sites to provide better services to the neighborhood and communities. So this has been how we have been using for the preparation processes, and also With all of this, the best part is that it was helpful to communicate with various stakeholders on the ground. Without having good backup data, information, analytics, maps, it is really hard to persuade or consult with diverse stakeholders. For example, this photo shows that the streetscapes of Karachi, and we are always talking about citizen engagement, but for those citizens as well, there are so many different stakeholders in there. For the streetscape, there's the drivers, pedestrians, or shopkeepers, vendors, and so on and so forth. And also we have local government officials. So to have them all in the consultation meetings and provide some evidence-based data information, it was a way easier to communicate in a better way and move forward. So we are also looking forward to even more creative and innovative future steps. Like with combining with the local knowledge and EO4 active results, we can develop a comprehensive inventory of public urban assets. As Jan mentioned earlier, it is really hard to get the ownership, the publicness of the public spaces from the remote sensing technology. So we can combine with the other data sets and also surveys, those methodologies. We can build up some more comprehensive set of inventory. And also, we are strongly interested in better understanding the quality and the use of public spaces. So when we are overlapping the identified public space layer with the other big data layers on the users or facility qualities, then we can better understand how those physical spaces are actually used by people. So typically before, this kind of public life has been surveyed manually. The people are going to the site and take the survey or observing how people are using for a couple of days. But when we're using these kind of technologies and big data analysis, this whole analysis can be a way easier and simpler. So I think let me finish up here, and then I'll be happy to discuss further altogether. Thank you.